So, like Jesse said, I am the Coastal Shore Specialist with the Oregon Coastal Management Program, which is housed within the Department of Land Conservation and Development. So, the Oregon Coastal Management Program is part of a national coastal management program run by NOAA. And so, all coastal states, including the Great Lakes states, all have these coastal management programs that are designed to help ensure that our coasts are protected and that we are working with state, federal, and local governments to make sure that that is happening. And so we do a lot of outreach projects. We do a lot of education projects, such as the King Tides Project. And I just started last February, so I've been here almost a year. So this is my first King Tides season with Oregon. I was part of the Virginia Sea Grant King Tides project for a couple of years when I lived there. So not new to King Tides, but new to the Oregon King Tides project. So I'm happy to be working with Jesse and to be able to do a lot of these outreach events because they're always fun and always get a lot of good public engagement. So I'll be talking not only about King Tides, but also a little bit about sea level rise and how the two interact and how we can use King Tides to kind of get an idea of what our coastal communities may look like under sea level rise in the future. All right, so I'll start with a little bit of background on climate change. I won't belabor this too much because I'm sure that everybody has seen some of these graphics and heard a lot about this before. Just kind of jumping in a little bit here. So most of our sun's energy comes in and is bouncing off of the Earth's surface and radiating back out to space. But we have these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, such as methane and carbon dioxide, some that are naturally existing and some that are human created. And these greenhouse gases are really effective at trapping this incoming radiation and preventing it from leaving from our atmosphere. And so essentially, we're trapping heat and we're warming the atmosphere, which then helps speed up the warming of our oceans as well. So you can see on the right-hand side there, we have atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations from about the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to roughly present. And you can see how well that matches with the temperature rising over that same time period. And so there's a really direct correlation that has been measured across both the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere and the temperature that we're seeing in the atmosphere. So one of the effects that this increased temperature in our atmosphere has is that it's not just the atmosphere that's warming, it's also our oceans that are warming. And as water warms, it expands. And so our ocean basins are staying roughly the same size and shape, not on a geologic scale, but over this human time scale. And so we see the water rising and the basin staying the same, so that water essentially doesn't have anywhere to go except up and out and onto land in a lot of cases. And so this thermal expansion is actually one of the main causes of sea level rise. You can see we also have things like glaciers and ice sheets melting that are major contributors as well. But that thermal expansion caused by the warming of our atmosphere and oceans is one of the main drivers. So some of the impacts that we can see, not only from sea level rise, but from climate change in general to the Oregon coast, are things like increased storminess, not only in the amount and the frequency of stormy events, but also in the extreme impacts from these events as well too. So we see increased flooding, increased erosion, more landslides, and severe winds in a lot of cases as well. Offshore, we see a lot of effects too, so it's not just on the coast, but also in the oceans. We see a lot of low oxygen events, which can lead to things like reduced shellfish productivity, both from those low oxygen events and from acidification of the waters. We can see changes in the marine ecosystems up and down the coast. In terms of the human population, we can also are starting to see and will continue to see influx of people moving from areas that are more heavily impacted by climate change and sea level rise to areas such as Oregon that may be impacted slightly less, or at least at the present impacted less. Like I said, I lived in Virginia for a couple of years, and it floods pretty much twice a day from tides every day. And that's so places like Norfolk, Virginia, Charleston in South Carolina, Miami, Florida are already seeing a lot of impacts from sea level rise. And so people may be moving from those places to areas where sea level rise is perhaps a little bit slower, or the climate is a little bit more temperate. So we can see these climate refugees already moving around not only the states, but the globe in general. And then in terms of sea level rise, we see impacts on our infrastructure. So not only on the landscape, but also on our roads. If frequent flooding events can be really harsh on asphalt and on concrete. And we can see impacts to properties. So oceanfront homeowners are seeing a lot of impacts from climate change and from sea level rise, and we'll continue to see those impacts. Our estuaries are very sensitive environments, and so we see a lot of impacts to not only the water column, but also to any plants and animals living in estuaries, where the saltwater to freshwater ratios are very specific, and the animals and plants that live in there are very well adapted to those specific conditions. And so any changes can have a very large impact on their ecosystems. And then things like water supplies too. So if we're seeing influx of salt water into our groundwater supplies, or things like stormwater systems. So if there is salt water impacting those, then when we have large flood events and rain events, those drains will not drain as well or as quickly. In terms of sea level rise specifically in Oregon, we're actually at a slight advantage compared to a lot of other very low-lying areas in the world and in the States. But we are influenced by certain things that can increase the impacts of sea level rise, both from a seasonal perspective to long-term perspectives. Excuse me, sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, so I have a little bit of a cough left. One of the things that impacts sea level rise here in Oregon is El Nino. So right now we are currently in an El Nino winter. So things that we see during El Nino winters here include elevated water levels, higher wave energy, and a shift in the wave direction and conditions to more southerly conditions. As we see a warming climate, we may see more El Nino type winters as well too. So we'll have these types of conditions more often, and perhaps more extreme in their impacts as well too. One of the reasons that we are in a slightly better position here in Oregon compared to other places is that there is significant vertical land motion. So we are on the Cascadia subduction zone here, which is, generally something that's talked about more when we're talking about tsunami impacts, but it does impact sea level rise as well too, because right now our tectonic plate is actually being uplifted as that subduction zone is occurring. And so we're currently kind of keeping pace with sea level rise, actually. Now, in the future, sea level rise may outpace that tectonic uplift. Also, if we do see a large Cascadia earthquake event, then that, of course, will offset that motion as well, too. So that is a geologic feature that we don't have any control over, of course. But right now, we are kind of keeping pace with sea level rise because of it. And then there's also something called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. So while El Nino is on the order of, 3 to 10 years, depending on the conditions that we are moving towards in climate change, the Pacific Decadal Oscillations are on the order of 20 to 30 years. And these are these warm and cool periods. And so when we are in times of warm periods, we may see increased sea level rise during those times. Compared to cool periods, we may see a slight lowering of those conditions. And so as you can see, some of this is very much anthropogenic or human caused, but there are also other natural phenomena that are occurring that impact sea level rise too. And so right now in the Pacific Northwest region, our sea level rise projections are saying that we should see about 0.5 to 5 feet by 2100. And of course, that is a very large range. There are a lot of things that go into these predictions and projections. And so it's not necessarily to say that we don't know what's going to happen. We know that the rise is happening, that we are seeing these changes already. It's just that we don't know things like exactly when the ice sheets may melt or how fast the glaciers will melt. So we're constantly in the scientific community updating these projections with the best available data. And it also depends too. So like I said, more low-lying areas will see faster impacts from sea level rise. If you live in a very high cliffed, bluffed area, then you may see slightly lower impacts. So it really depends on the region that you live in as well too. So I know you're here to hear about king tide, so why do we keep talking about sea level rise? So it's really a total water compound system here that we're talking about. So on top of sea level rise, we have things like El Nino, we have things like ocean circulation patterns, king tides, coastal storms. So these can all compound on top of each other and cause compound flooding issues. So like I said, king tides generally happen during winter. Coastal storms generally happen more intensely during winter as well. El Nino is a winter phenomena as well too. So this can be seasonal. We can see these impacts kind of building upon each other. So one of those building blocks are king tides that we need to take into consideration. So what is a king tide? A king tide is a term that we use, not in the scientific community. In the scientific community, we generally refer to these as perigean spring tides, but king tides is much catchier, so we generally use that term. And these happen when the sun and moon align with the earth. So when they're all in alignment, and when the Earth's orbit is closest to the sun and the moon's orbit is closest to the earth. So it's this special combination of conditions that causes an extra strong gravitational pull on our Earth's oceans and makes these extra high tides that we see generally every winter. And so we see these anywhere from 3 to 4 times a year during winter. This season, we had king tides in November, December, January, and February. So we had a 4 king tide season. Sometimes it's only 3. King tides as a term was actually coined in Australia and New Zealand. They wanted to have a way of documenting these high tide events that they saw causing a lot of flooding events, causing a lot of coastal erosion. And so they created the King Tide Project as a way to have people who are visiting the coast or living on the coast help document these conditions so that we can see changes over time and see kind of how susceptible some areas are to king tides and to these flooding events. So in 2008, the King Tide Project started down in Australia and New Zealand. And then by 2010, it had spread kind of around the globe, including to Oregon, where the Oregon King Tides Project started. So the Oregon King Tides photo initiative, again, relies on our community participants to help capture photos of local coastal areas that are subject to flooding or erosion. We encourage people to use specific areas or specific landmarks that we can help or that can help us gauge just how high tide the conditions are compared to normal. So if there is a signpost or a dock or a marina, anything that can help us see just how high tide or just how high those tides are compared to normal high tides. So buildings, jetties, bridges, seawalls, anything that is a fixed point that can kind of help us gauge. As always, we are very big on safety measures. So in general, not just during king tides, but if you're on the beach, it's really important to make sure that you don't turn your back on the water, that you follow any safety guidelines that are posted either online or in person. If there are any beach access or road closures, make sure that you respect those. A lot of places will have signage up during king tides along the coast, so make sure that you follow any safety guidelines that are on there. And remember that if you're taking photos, no photo or video is worth risking your life or your safety or the safety of those with you. Water moves incredibly fast and powerful, especially large waves or sneaker waves, which are very common during winter as well. So just really make sure to be safe, but it's a really fun time to get out and to be able to participate in community science and to see these really high tides that are very exciting. It's a really cool natural phenomena that we have every year. And it's a great chance just to get out to the coast, as if we need more chances to get out to the coast, right? But it's a good excuse to get out there and to just take part in something really cool that helps us document these events. And one of the ways that we use the king tide photos is to help give us an idea of what sea level rise conditions may look like in the future. And so these king tides, as I said, occur during winter right now, but these types of flooding events and erosion events will be much more common as we see sea levels rise too. And so we'll start to see more inundation of these coastal communities on regular high tides. It won't take a king tide event anymore. So in this way, we can kind of gauge how conditions are changing over time and see where areas that are susceptible right now may benefit from mitigation or adaptation projects. And so it's helpful not only for scientists, but for local planners, for state planners. It's a way to really contribute to the knowledge of these areas. So how to submit king tide photos. We have our Oregon King Tides Project website here. We'll see if this will open. Can everyone see this web page? Jesse, are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is our website. So here there's more information about how you can participate. We'll always have
Rhiannon. I don't know if this is just a photo of the website or I don't think the website actually is up. It's just a photo.
Okay, thank you. Let me, sometimes it does that on Zoom. Let me do this.
Perfect.
Okay, do you see the website now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is our Oregon King Tides Project website. We have the season's king tide dates always available here. Something that is really cool as well too is we have our tide map. So once this loads, if you click on any station, it will have the dates of the king tides highlighted here in this orange color. So as you can see, they're the highest high tides of that given time period. So you can choose any location that you would like to go out to. You can see the tides range from place to place too. So that kind of plays into how sea level rise will impact places as well too. Some places are more susceptible to higher high water. You can see down here in Charleston, very high tides, 9.18, 9.2. And then how to participate. If you click on the participate page, we have our photo contest. So currently our 4 categories that are up for prizes, which I should have mentioned before as well too. So we partner with the Oregon Coastal Visitors Association to offer prizes for our 4 categories of photos and videos, which this year are coastal flooding, coastal erosion and waves, bays and estuaries, and then comparison shots that show average conditions at high tide versus those same spot during a king tide. And then again, our tide map, so that gives you some good examples, which I'll go through in a minute as well too, of where you might want to go, what we're looking for. And then we have submit photos or videos. And this is our photo submission page. So it's a fairly easy process. If you'd like to grant us permission under the Creative Commons license, then we're able to share your photos, use them in things like this presentation, and our outreach, our social media. If you'd like to take part in the contest, who you would like to give photo credit to. So right now this is just filled out with my information apparently. And then you upload your photo and you choose your photo location. So you can either put in the address or click on the map. And then some helpful information that we're looking for any photos or videos. So which direction you're looking in, the date, especially the year is very helpful for this. Any photo content. So you can click and choose as many are applicable here for that. If you'd like to caption it, and then a description is helpful, especially if it's not especially clear in the video. And then for the tide, so we accept king tide videos and photos, of course, but then also during average high tides and during storm events. So it kind of gives us an idea of what that specific place looks like across a different variety of conditions. And then your email address if you would like to be given credit as well too. And then you submit. And what we do with these photos is we have a Flickr account that we house all of the photos going back to 2010. And not only are they categorized by year and by season, but also by those content categories that we have as well too. So you can, if you're looking for specific pictures about hazards or those comparison shots, any highlights. We even have some aerial photos that were taken back in 2018, 2021. And so we house this Flickr account not only on our website, but we also have a specific Flickr account too, which I will put the links up to. And then we also just have an events page, which currently has this webinar as well as past events, any talks that we're giving, any public events that we would like to highlight. So that's a good place to check in and see what's coming up here too. So I will stop sharing this and go back to the presentation. Okay. So again, some helpful information that we would love to have included with every video or photo. The date, including the year, so that we're able to look back and see the changes over time, what time the photo was taken, so we can see if it was during peak high tide or peak high tide during king tides, or if it was maybe during one of the lower tides of the day. Tide height, if known, that would be helpful. A description of the photograph, photo orientation, and then any location information. And so you can see this is a comparison shot on the right here. So you have average high tide and then during a king tide event. So you can see just the large difference there in the coastal flooding and the impacts to this town and the infrastructure there. And then I just have some more examples of what to submit. Again, comparison shots are really great, especially if we are looking at places that maybe we don't live, we're not as acutely familiar with the normal conditions there. It's really easy to look at a picture and just be like, oh yeah, that's a lot of water. But when you see compared to the normal conditions, you can tell just how high some of these king tides are. Again, more comparison shots, always really striking. I will say that we in the past have had waves as its own category, but we were getting a lot of really great, very professional grade photos of these huge waves that were offshore that weren't necessarily caused by king tides. It was more because the king tides were occurring during a storm event or because it was winter conditions. So they looked great, but we've combined the waves category with coastal erosion for this season because we're really looking for that impact on the coastline, on the human and built environment, as well as on our natural environment as well too. So the waves are great. They're very exciting. They make very dramatic shots, but we really want to tie them back into king tides for this photo contest. And then I have some useful links here. So our website is there at the top. We are on social media, and so we post about when the king tides are, any events that are coming up. We share other people's photos who have submitted, and so it's a really good opportunity to see what's going on with king tides and to stay in touch with us. If you have any questions, it's a good way to get in contact with us too. We're on Facebook as well, so it's usually a lot of the same stuff on Instagram, depending on which social media you prefer. Our Flickr account is there as well too, and our email is a good way of getting in touch with us as well. We do ask that photos and videos be submitted through our website, through that participate and submit page. In the past, we have had people submit them a variety of different ways, but it was kind of a pain to try and compile everything and make sure that everyone's photos and videos were all accounted for. So if you submit them that way, they get automatically uploaded to Flickr and entered into the contest. So that's a really good way just to make sure that your photos and videos are submitted properly. And everything is Oregon King Tides. So if you forget how to get in touch with us, just look up Oregon King Tides or reach out to me or Jesse, and we'll be happy to point you to the right direction. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and welcome any questions.
Okay, so we have a couple of good questions to start, and then I've got a couple too. First question, is tectonic uplift keeping pace with sea level rise throughout the Oregon coast? Isn't sea level rise relatively greater on the Lincoln and Tillamook County coasts?
Yes, that's a great question. And so we do see the tectonic uplift range across the state. And so that's where that regional sea level rise compared to statewide or global really comes into play. And so you can be, 20, 30 miles apart from another town, and you're going to be very impacted very differently by sea level rise.
Great, thanks for that question and answer. Second question, do long exposure shots help so you can see an average water level of a location in addition to a normal exposure?
Yeah, that would be great. I don't think that we have a specific category for that, but I would imagine that that would be really helpful and just a really cool shot in general. So yeah, you're welcome to get as creative or artsy with it as possible, as long as we can still see like the natural conditions. We don't want any photoshopped waves or anything like that. But long exposure I think would be great.
Yeah, good point. Nothing photoshopped.
Yeah.
Totally defeats the purpose of this whole thing. Okay,
No sea
everybody.
monsters coming out.
Okay, I have a question. So a couple of questions. So first of all, recently, like early December, I think it was, we had a massive flooding event. Highway 101 was closed. I couldn't get down to Newport. My event was canceled because there was so much going on. It was not a king tide. And this happens every year, of course. And I'm curious if you have thought about, and the team there, having like special times and sort of opening it up to other flooding events
But yeah,
that aren't king tides, because I get people contacting me too, like, which should we take photos today and submit them? And maybe there might be another category next year or something that may invite those types of photos.
I agree. And I think, I mean, we're definitely open to it on our end. The categories can change every year or two. We just added bays and estuaries this year. Um, I do think that that
Yeah,
would be helpful. We have the the choice on those photo submission for coastal storm, so
right,
it doesn't
right.
have to show the tides. But making that a category for the photo contest would be a good idea as well too, because I had another question too that I just received this morning. so we had the king tides in December, and they weren't quite as dramatic in a lot of areas as we were expecting. I was down on the beach in Lincoln City, and it was supposedly peak high tide, but it didn't even look like a normal high tide, let
Right.
alone a king tide. But then the following week, we had a storm event, and there was a lot of flooding, a lot of erosion, really high tides. Um, so we're just picking out these highest high tides, and that's kind of where it comes down to the fact that it's not king tides aren't a scientific term or condition where it's just the highest high tides.
Right.
And
Right.
so when there are those compounding effects of large storm events, or really high wave activity, you may see action along the coast that actually looks higher than normal king tides or average high tides. So yeah, having some way to account for that and still document that would be really helpful.
Yes, and it's a great thing to just talk about during this project and during the outreach of this project, that these storm surges and these high tide events do happen when there
Yeah.
is not a predicted high tide or king tide, I mean. And it's just another way to talk about safety as well, and to talk about sea level rise also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question: on the East Coast, they get sunny day flooding as sea level rise backs up subsurface groundwater. Do we have that here, or are we at risk of it as sea level rise increases?
That's a really good question. And so that's one of the things that we saw a lot of in Virginia. It was the sunny day flooding events. So they weren't associated with high tide, or they were associated with high tides, but not with large storm events, not with, they were just, normal high tides on a sunny summer day. You would see flooding all the time. And so that's not something that we see as often here. There are areas that are definitely more susceptible to flooding under minimal precipitation or high tide events, especially if they're more low lying, or if the sewer systems are older, the wastewater treatment
Mm.
systems are older, they're more likely to get backed up more easily by that intrusion of salt water. The area south of Seaside floods very easily during king tide, high tides, as well as just a lot of normal high tides if there has been a lot of rain, precipitation. And so the areas that flood during the king tides are, again, really helpful for kind of giving us an idea of where we might want to spend some more time and energy and money kind of addressing these issues now, so that
Mhm.
we're not caught off guard when it does become a more frequent sunny day flooding kind of scenario.
Right. Yeah, that was a great question. We
Yeah.
have along the coast, of course, many places where there's our septic systems really close to the ocean. And
Mhm.
these are also some of the places that I think we would like to see more photos of, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like campgrounds, and trailer parks, sorry, mobile home parks, and there are all kinds of things. So those are also like infrastructure and fixed points that we would like to see pictures of.
Yeah.
Um, Another question: do king tides tend to create greater beach erosion than standard high tides over the long term, or at least in terms of natural beach renourishment? Or will beaches, depending on wind, etc., reset for the most part? So much beach erosion seems to be more from coastal runoff from water coming down the coastal mountains, especially in clear-cut forest areas. Question.
That's a good question too. So for the long term, most of the impacts that we see during king tides and during winter events do tend to be more seasonal. There's a lot of erosion that's happening, but then during the summer season, we do see a lot more accretion. So a lot of the cyclical erosion, accretion, erosion, accretion. Um, and so some of it is episodic. If there's a really large storm event or very significant king tide event, you may see, some bluff failures, some landslides, and those won't necessarily be, fixed by natural processes over the next year or season or year. So some of those larger, more episodic failures along our coast will take a lot longer to reset, or will need kind of human intervention, especially if it's impacting roads or property or any kind of infrastructure. But in general, you do see more of that kind of cyclical, seasonal impact from the king tides.
Okay, good question. I have another question. So something that really can show the impact of king tides are the movement of large wood, of course, and erosion. And we have talked about, you and I and others at OCMP, about photos like that. So, for example, we have there are a number of mile adopters here on the line tonight, which is great to see you. As I wrote in an email earlier today, you don't have to take the king tide photos on your mile. Of course, you can take them wherever you want. But a good thing to do on your mile is to keep track of that wood. So people do, one of the things I love about what some volunteers do is when they send in their mile reports and their photos, they will talk about a piece of wood that's moved over the years. And even a piece of wood that has like disappeared and come back, like this giant piece of wood. And that is really interesting, right? I mean, something that people don't know when they move to Oregon, for example, and we get this question, I get this question when I'm down on the beach, is how did the wood get there? Was it placed by, homeowners? And most of the time, of course, that wood is up there and it was carried by very strong waves, surges, and that's why it is where it is. And so one of my questions is, where on the form would you, like, if it is a post-storm event, and I know we've talked about this over the years, but I don't know if I know exactly like where we would put that. So like, let's say we have a before after picture of erosion. And I know that OCMP is interested in this. I know that the Oregon King Tides Project is interested in this. Like somebody's been photographing a cliff for a while, or somebody has been photographing a dune for a while, and then they have those pre-photos and then those post photos of a giant landslide or a big erosion event that did happen during the king tides. Where would you, what would you click? Like it wouldn't be, would that be king tide? Would that be a king tide? Would that be a storm event? What would that be?
That's a good question. I think our photo description box would be a good place to put in there what
Right.
is occurring in the photo. So if you want to kind of give us some context for what we're actually looking at, because if we just see a photo of a large, log, we'll be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, was that was that from this king tide? Was that already there? Like, what, we need some context. So
Right.
that would be a
Okay.
good place. Um, we could possibly also put, or we definitely could put, an other box for, instead of having just king tides, average tides, and coastal storms. We could have, a post-storm event or an other where people can put that in. Again, this is an evolving project, and we want to make sure that it's not only useful for us, but useful for the public as well too, and that we are responding to people's, wants and needs for the project. So that kind of feedback is great for us, for Jesse and myself to hear, so that we can kind of adapt to the needs of the project.
Great. Okay, good. So that's a good idea. So put it into the description.
Yeah, I would
Um,
say in the description, you can also put, there's the boxes that say erosion or waves, or all those descriptors.
right.
You
Mm,
can probably put them in there too. I think there's an other box as well too, so you could give us a little more context in that box as well too.
thank you. Um, I wanted to tell you too, Rhiannon, that we finally got a time down today for the next talk. So I'll
Okay.
send you information about that tomorrow morning, but we will be having an in-person talk, and Rhiannon may be there with me in Shore Acres. So if there's anyone here on the South Coast, we are partnering, Coast Watch is partnering with Oregon State Parks. Really excited. They're on board now. They want to start getting photos of campgrounds, flooded trails, flooded parks on the coast. And so we're going to be having our first King Tide kickoff with Oregon State Parks, and there will be rangers there to talk about it, to share photos from past years of flooded parking lots, flooded campgrounds, talking about safety, that type of a thing. So it's really exciting. So that will be Okay, yes, I will, Stacy. Hi. Yes, so 2 o'clock p.m. at Shore Acres, and there's like a place there where there will be a screen and everything. So that will be on the Oregon Shores website. It'll also be on the Oregon King Tides website. So check that out. And if Stacy, I forget to email you, just shoot me an email. And actually, never mind, I'm going to write it down right now. Stacy Reynolds. Okay. I'll get that information to you. Stacy is here from the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, who are a part of this in their with the contest, and so that's exciting. They are a partner, and we have numerous organizations up and down the coast who help with this outreach and participate as well. They are curious. We have landowners, we have conservation groups and land trusts who are curious about what's happening on their lands. And so this can really be, there's so many different places where you can take photos and be involved in this. And I really recommend using the awesome map on the website. We get a lot of questions like, where should I go? Where do you need photos? Look at the map. You can also contact us too, but we'll just go to the map. Sometimes I haven't had time this year, but usually I create a little list for myself just to have that list ready for when volunteers contact us, or would-be volunteers would contact us. So with that, I'm going to add the website in here again so that you can have it in the chat. If you have any more questions, please ask away. Is there a way to find out what groups are working on a particular mile in your area? Yeah, here, why don't you can send, if we do know of anything, we can let you know. And so, Rhiannon, will you put your email into the chat, and I will add mine in there too. And then go ahead, Desiree, and send us an email. Okay, Yachats Ocean Road. Okay. Just a second here. Desiree, you can private chat me and send me your email, and I will get back to you. And then John French has a question. Hey, John. I'm going to unmute you just a second here. Okay. All right.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, can hear you very well. Hi, John.
This isn't really a question. This is like my 5th king tide season, I think. And the November and December king tides have been very mild, but I live just a block from the beach between Walport and Newport. And the last couple of weeks, the surf and the waves have been like something I've never seen before. And there have been beach hazard warnings almost every day. So I would just encourage everyone to be really safe out there. If you're down on the beach and you think you're far enough from the water, you might not really be far enough. So just be careful. Okay, it's really the erosion on the dunes has been tremendous. It's dangerous out there. So just be careful.
Thank you, John. Yeah, and that's a great point.
Go ahead, Rhiannon.
I'm sorry. That's a great point. So yeah, it's not just the king tides that are exciting and or a hazard to be around on the beach during winter. We have, high instances of snaker waves. And again, this is an El Nino year, and so we're seeing increased wave activity, large storm events, and higher water levels than normal because it is an El Nino year too. So we have warmer water, higher water, in conjunction with these high tides. So there are a lot of coastal hazards during winter, and yeah, again, just be really safe and have a lot of situational awareness when you're on the beach or anywhere near the coast.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, John. And I echo that too. It has been a tremendous year, even when it's not a king tide. And there have been some very sad stories coming out of California, and we have sad stories here in Oregon almost every year. At this point, what I tell Coast Watch volunteers is to not even enter the beach on a king tide. There's no reason to go to the beach on a king tide. Take these photos from a safe location. And it is all about safety as well. It's really, really important. We can be safe and we can practice science at the same time, but you have to be mindful. So always a really good message. Thank you, John. Okay. Any more comments or questions? Thank you so much for all those of you who stuck around this evening. I'm going to put another website into the chat, which is the Oregon Shores website. Check it out and let me know if you have any questions about any of our programs, and I can answer them or send you to the right person. Thank you to everybody who asked your great questions tonight. And again, our next event will be down on the South Coast. I don't think we're going to do a hybrid. So sorry about that. But if you're down on the coast and it's you have nothing to do at 2 o'clock, come on over and say hi at Shore Acres. We'll have that information up shortly on our website and on the King Tides website. And Rhiannon, thank you so much for doing this and being here tonight and sharing with us also. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody for joining us tonight. And we hope to see all of your photos and videos taken from a very safe distance.
Yes, from a safe distance. And yeah, please, if you have questions over the season, let us know. So they're coming up right on the 11th through the 13th of this month. So 3 days from now, they will start. And then February's are, do you know those by heart?
I believe it's the 8th through the 10th.
That's right. Okay. February 8th through the 10th. And so get your photos in. But one more quick plug to let everybody know is that if you have photos from past King Tides and you haven't uploaded them, it's not too late. They are still part of the record. So definitely get those in. And you can upload high tide photos, like average high tide photos, I think any time of the year, but you can definitely do that during this season. Can you upload them? Is the website open all year?
Yeah, the photo submissions are open almost year round. We do close them, I think, for like a month or so that we can make sure everything is compiled from the previous season, that we're ready to go for the next season. But we'll put out a warning when that happens. But almost all year round, we welcome submissions.
Okay, good to know. All right, I'm trying to copy Desiree's email right now. Thank you so much for being here, everybody, and have a great night and be safe out there. Take care of yourselves. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.